looks like we are connected for the episode. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. Make sure we're coming through here. All right, perfect. So we'll give everyone a second to join. Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of Bridging the Gap. I'm your host, Isaac Lindenberger, and today we have two very special guests. We have Paul Offit, who is a pediatrician who has been a vaccine expert for a long time in the field. He's written a lot of books about vaccines. He's on the CDC Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices. He really knows what he's talking about. And we also have Lynette Marie Barron, who's been a vaccine advocate for vaccine injury awareness for over 5 years. And many know her from the CDC ACIP meetings, the advisory for the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. And so they've both been around for a long time. So we're going to bring them both on, introduce them, and start the discussion. So here we go. Hello, Paul.
Hi.
Hi, how's it going? Lynette should be on any second now. There she is. Hey, guys.
What's up?
Good to have you both here. All right, cool. So Paul Offit is on the left. I don't think there's any flip screen here, so should be your left too. And Lynette is on my right, Lynette Marie Barron. Great to have you guys both here. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Sure.
So normally dialogue between the two sides of this discussion is discouraged. There's a mentality that the other side is bad people. But the objective of this show is to kind of break that stigma and try to have fruitful discussion by seeing each other's respective humanity. And I think we're really going to get somewhere with this. So thankfully, you two are already friends. You guys already know each other. I believe you guys met at the CDC ACIP meetings, the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices. So how did you both end up going to those meetings? Lynette, what brought you to the CDC meetings in the first place?
Honestly, I was kind of digging around online, trying to find more ways to get our voices heard. And I was looking at the CDC's website, and I happened to see that they were having these meetings and that the public was welcome. And so I went to my first meeting in early 2017, and then I ended up getting sick, and I didn't go to, I think I skipped 1 or 2 meetings. And then I started going every meeting, started running the inundation of, the CDC page and inviting tons of other parents in, and just kind of started making sure that our side had a voice in the room as well.
Awesome. Okay. That's cool. What about you, Paul? Have you been going there a while?
Yeah, well, I was asked to be a voting member on the ACIP starting in 1998 and remained a voting member for about 5 years. And then I've been on working groups since then. So I've been to every ACIP meeting for the last 22 years.
Oh, wow. That's great. Okay. So you guys started both going to these meetings a while ago. So how did you guys first interact at one of these meetings? What's the story there?
I'll let Lynette tell that story.
Yeah, that's kind of my bad. Okay. Well, okay. Here's what happened was, when I got there, I usually sit on the front row. I'm kind of just that person. Like I said, I like to let them know our presence is there. And I know I stand out already. So it just seemed like a good spot for me. They used to have the mic in the middle, so I would sit there as well because I like to be right next to the microphone to support the people on my side who were speaking, who may be nervous or shaky or something like that. And so Paul happened to be sitting where I usually sit, and there was a seat open next to him and one seat open next to that. Well, I was there with my son, who's 18 now. And so myself and my son, I grabbed my son and pulled him and went and sat down next to Paul. And Tia had taken a picture, Tia Severino, and she had posted it to Facebook, and all kinds of people were like, dump your coffee on him, elbow him. And I got really upset. And I was like, look, that's not how I am. I wouldn't do that. Like, honestly, he's been normal. Like, he hasn't done anything to me. And I was looking through one of the packets looking for something, and he said, I don't think they gave us that one. And I kind of was like, he just spoke to me. Like, did that really just happen? Because I mean, I'm wearing a resist, rest, repeat shirt. I've got blue hair at this point. It's odd to me because I'm like, all I knew is what I had been told about him. My perception had not been my own. And so, time went on and he had to get up and leave. I think he said he had a conference to go to and that he wasn't leaving because I'd sat next to him. And I kind of told him I was there a little bit and he had to go. So before we'd even got home, we had emailed each other and kind of, I think Paul had said, you were right. Like, it does neither side any good to vilify each other. And we just started talking and we never stopped.
Wow, that's crazy. I wonder what the results have been had you spilled your coffee on him. That might have been interesting as well.
Probably not the same. I really don't want to go to jail. Okay. Like, I know I look this way, but these are all from tattoo shops. So.
Right. Man, that's crazy. So, okay. So you guys ended up becoming friends, and that's really interesting because Paul, you invented the rotavirus vaccine, and Lynette, you believe your child was injured by that vaccine, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. What is it like? How do you see past that and see the humanity in someone that most people wouldn't be able to see past? How do you kind of view that?
Because for me, it's like you don't put hate on a person. Like, you may hate a deed, or you may hate the misunderstanding, or you may hate the system or whatever. But for me, like, Paul is just a person. And Paul and I agree on many things in life, and we disagree on some things in life. But that doesn't mean I have to hate Paul. That doesn't mean I have to view him as some bad person or a monster. I mean, honestly, I find Paul quite endearing. He's very smart. He has a great sense of humor. I enjoy talking to him, just being honest. I mean, he's one of my better friends, and that's just being real. Whoever doesn't like that, I'm being real.
Wow, that's really crazy to hear, but it's really impressive. I think it really sets a landmark for how this discussion can actually happen, even with personal conflict like that. Paul, how do you feel? Has this friendship changed your perspective on the anti-vaccine movement in any way, actually having a personal face and a friend involved in the other side?
Well, see, I think, I guess I separate it into two parts. I think that the true anti-vaccine activist, to me, is someone who believes that everyone's out to do them harm, that they're conspiracy theorists at some level. They think all the doctors in that room don't care. They think all the doctors in that room are lying to them, and they're evil people. So I'm not a big fan of those people. I don't, first of all, part because I hear from them all the time about what a terrible person I am, but
fair enough.
See, I don't see Lynette that way. I think Lynette is remarkably smart and very, thoughtful about this and wants answers. And I think that there are certainly those situations now where there aren't data. I mean, where it would be nice to be able to generate data. I mean, when I was on the advisory committee for immunization practice, I asked to be head of the polio vaccine working group because I wanted to move us away from the oral polio vaccine to the inactivated vaccine. I thought that there was no reason 8 to 10 children every year had to suffer polio from the polio vaccine. There was a better vaccine out there. There was certainly a vaccine that worked just as well and was safe. Other countries had eliminated polio without ever going to the oral polio vaccine. So I brought this man whose son had developed polio from the polio vaccine onto our committee. I brought him onto the working group. And he became a powerful voice. And there was a lot of convincing to do. There were a number of doctors on that group who didn't want to go to the inactivated vaccine. And so to me, that's the perfect vaccine safety activist. I mean, it was a real issue. He was always respectful, which is remarkable considering what his son went through. And his son, recently passed away, actually. And he was honored recently at the ACIP because of his persistence and his I think his generosity of spirit. I see in Lynette that same generosity of spirit. And so therefore, I think when someone has a spirit like hers, there's good things that can happen. So I don't put her in the same group, I guess, as the people who are so remarkably hateful and mean-spirited, which I just is an immediate turnoff. When they get up to the microphone at those ACIP meetings and make their, sort of the Nazi analogies, it's just, they lose us. I don't know how they think they can be influential doing that.
Right. And you want to be effective. You want to be able, if you have real concerns about vaccine safety and you want to get those through to the other side, you can't demonize them. Otherwise, they have no incentive to listen to you. It's just dehumanization. It's not going to go anywhere. So I think Lynette's process is successful.
Yeah, it shuts me down if somebody is to talk to me that way. So why would I do that to a room full of people I wish would listen to me? I mean, when I go in there, I come in there and I really do come in there with love in my heart, and I mean it. And I talk to all of them just like I would talk to a friend, regardless of who they are, what side, where they are, what side of the rope they're on. I've always been that way. And I do my best to try to go in there and set the example for other people. I request people, be respectful, because if you'll look at the room, you can read a room if you actually try. And I've been doing this long enough. If you watch the room, when you're respectful, when you speak to them like they're people just like you, they're all looking at you, they're all engaging, they're all paying attention. When you call them Nazis, when you say F you, when you call out people by name and try to make them look bad, the room looks at the floor, looks at their phone, looks at their laptops. You lose the connection of the room. And what's really messed up about that is you've just broken that connection for the person following you. So it really does bother me when people behave that way.
Yeah, I can't see the success that comes from it. It doesn't really lead anywhere. And if both sides take that approach, I really think we can get somewhere when it comes to listening to both sides and finding some real compromises. So you guys have a real friendship outside of vaccines. So you guys actually have had dinner before and share memes and stuff. I just think that's so awesome that you guys can pull something like that off. I think it serves as an example for other people. I think it's a good idea to find a friend in a movement that you don't agree with, because then you can really see the other side. Because it's hard to see someone else's perspective when you group them into a whole narrative that's completely against you, and you villainize it, you stereotype it. It's a generalization, and it's not really accurate with reality. But if you put a human face to it and a real personality and someone that you can connect with and talk to, you can really hear what they have to say. And I've experienced this in my own family. My mom's against vaccines, and my brother is adamantly supportive of vaccines. And it's unfortunate. My mom moved to Texas recently because, the whole country's saying she's this bad mom who didn't vaccinate her kids. And my mom is literally, I could not have asked for a better mom ever. She's the best mom I could have ever asked for. I love her to death. And it's really sad that this has hurt their connection. It's really a tragedy, and it doesn't need to be like that. You can find someone who you disagree with and still connect with them. I told you about this the other day, Lynette. I was watching home videos recently because I went down to Texas to visit my mom, and there's this video of my little brother, and he's like, "Mom, I love you. You're the best mom ever. I'll always love you," that kind of thing. And my mom started crying because, they're fighting right now over all of this. And I want to see their friendship. I want to see their connection be rebuilt. But I also want other people to see that this is possible. Vaccines don't have to be so divisive. They don't have to divide families. They don't have to divide friendships. And if you guys can do it, I think anyone can. So I think that's why this is a good model.
I agree. Well, I would say it's probably not many walks of life that Paul would even have a friend like me. I would guess doing what he does and being who he is. So, it is, I appreciate the fact that he even gave me the chance of having a friendship. I respect that, because most people discredit me from the jump just for the way that I look. So for him to even give me a chance and speak to me, that meant a lot to me in the first place. And I wrote that piece called The Velvet Rope back in the day about ASIP, all about perspective, because this is where I think the biggest disconnect comes from. Paul is doing what he believes to be best. Paul he's done plenty of homework here. He's got the credentials, and in his heart, I've got to know him. And I will tell you, I don't see a monster. I don't see some horrible person. I see a human being that I very much care about. And I think that people need to understand that we're all this. God reigns on the just and the unjust, whoever those people are. I've said it a million times. God hears his prayers just like he hears mine. There's no reason to treat each other with hate. There's just not. Hate breeds hate, love breeds love. Spread love infectiously. It's much better than coronavirus.
Yes, it is. About what you said, Lynette, some people choose to see the bad in others. And if you're looking for it, it's there to be found. But I choose to see the good in others. And maybe that blinds me a little bit, but it's who I am. and I want to make the most of it. And I think that's who all of us are. So let's make the most of it together. What do you guys see as potential barriers to this kind of connection? Did you have any hesitation at first, Paul, when it came to, did you think maybe this friendship would influence your judgment in any way? Or how do you see that?
No, I didn't think it would influence my judgment. I thought, what I like about Lynette is, as I said earlier, her generosity of spirit. But I think it's perfectly reasonable to have concerns about vaccines. They, like any medical product that has a positive effect, it can have a negative effect. Vaccines are certainly that, and some of those negative effects can be quite severe, like polio from the oral polio vaccine. And I think that that it's perfectly reasonable to demand answers. I do. So and there's places where there's not a lot of information. So for example, people are worried about how someone who might have an enzyme deficiency with this MTHFR enzyme. I mean, could they, when they get a vaccine, be more at risk? There's not a lot of data on that. It's not hard to actually generate those data. So I don't know if Lynette remembers this, but when I sort of brought her up to meet Frank DeStefano, who's head of the vaccine safety branch at the national, it used to be the National Immunization Program, now the National Center for Immunization of Respiratory Diseases. I mean, he has the capacity to do that. He has the capacity to do that kind of study through the Vaccine Safety Data Link. And so, I see myself as being able to facilitate that sort of thing for Lynette, to help her, to help people who have those kinds of questions, because I think it's perfectly reasonable to ask the question. I guess where sometimes things break down a little bit is then when you have to believe the answer. If the study shows that one thing is true, I think you have to believe that that's true and recognize the effort. I mean, I think that any question somebody has about vaccines is reasonable. That whether they think it causes diabetes or hypertension or attention deficit disorder or hyperactivity or whatever they think it is, that's all a reasonable question and answerable. And so we should make an attempt to answer it. And my only feeling is when we do answer it, or when enough studies have come forward to show that a truth has emerged, that people believe it. But there are some, at least. And see, I don't like the side thing. Her side, my side. I don't like that. I think Lynette and I are on the same side. We want what's best for children. We may come in different ways, but I think we both want the same thing.
Yeah, I like that way of putting it. The risks with vaccines, I think if you acknowledge them, however rare they are, you enhance public confidence in vaccination, because the idea that if you say they're 100% safe and effective, people don't really buy that. But if you say they're mainly safe and effective most of the time, and you acknowledge the risks, they're going to see you as someone who's willing to tell the truth. And then they're going to actually listen to what you have to say. And if you're willing to acknowledge risks, then they might be willing to acknowledge benefits.
That's
and
right.
Then you might be able to go somewhere with, this is where vaccines are good, this is where there might be some risk. Let's make an assessment based on the risk versus benefit. There's actually a lot of studies on that too that are really interesting. So I think acknowledging the other side itself is worthy. Like you said, any question about vaccines is a good one. And there's a mentality that if you ask questions about vaccines, you're just not trusting them enough and you need to be censored and that kind of thing. And I think that's total failure. When you censor someone, you're confirming their worldview is accurate, even if it's not. So I don't think that's the solution at all.
Yeah.
It's definitely, thankfully we're seeing less and less of that. So I think we're seeing more fruitful discussions that are willing to acknowledge that both people have something to say that is worth listening to. Like you said, it's a good question. So
I think that COVID-19, vaccine and all that really did help people to understand more what I was trying to say about Paul and him giving, him caring about safety. Because I think Paul honestly considers himself a vaccine safety risk activist in a way, himself a little bit, because he does care. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but when you're speaking out about fast tracking and, skipping animal trials and those kinds of things, you're speaking out against the lack of safety. To me, for people to say he's just 100% pro-vaccine, he doesn't care about the science, he doesn't care about the safety, he just wants to make billions of dollars or whatever. I'm just saying, I'm watching him literally tell them, you need to be slowing this down. You need to make damn well sure, was his words, that you do these, trials and these studies right. And, I was so proud of him. I think my soul left out of my skin and came back in, because it was a beautiful moment to me, because it was other people getting to see what I've seen. other people seeing humanity, and I know that, and I think it hurts his feelings a little bit, just to be honest, when people are like, oh, look, he's a human being. Well, duh, you know. I mean,
Right.
seriously. But I mean, so I mean, it was weird to see how all of a sudden it was like everybody blowing me up, like, did you see this? Did you see this? Oh my goodness, what's going on with Paul? Did he leave his own body? Did he this? Did he this? Who replaced him? And I'm just sitting there smiling, going, I know Paul. I had seen this for so long. Like, I'm not even shocked right now, So I mean, it was nice for me to see finally some of the people that I look up to or that I care about, finally seeing him and understanding how I could be friends with him, or how we could, actually, connect, because he's not a monster. He's just a man. He's just a person. He has a family. He has he works hard. You know what I'm saying? Like, people have got to wrap their head around the fact that he wasn't created on some foreign planet and, came here with some horrible thing to derail humanity.
Are you sure, Paul? Is that true?
That's how people treat him.
I just want to make sure.
What surprised me a little bit is that, let me put this in some perspective. It's really surprised me that people thought that I was anybody different when I stood up for vaccine safety. I think I've been standing up for vaccine safety since the beginning. I mean, as we created our vaccine, we went through phase 1, phase 2, and then ultimately phase 3 trials for this vaccine. This is a virus that caused virtually every child in the United States to have disease by the age of 5. There'd be 2 to 3 million cases a year, about 75,000 hospitalizations a year from rotavirus, which is the cause of fever, vomiting, and diarrhea, and about 60 deaths a year in the U.S. But killed 2,000 children a day in the world. I mean, this is a bad virus. So. But all along, it was always about safety. I mean, because you're giving something to healthy children. I mean, you have to hold it to a really high standard of safety. It doesn't mean it's not going to have any safety problem. It just means that you have to do everything you can to lessen the risk of it having a safety problem. So when that vaccine then moved through phase 3 trials, and it became clear that it actually was going to be a vaccine. I mean, although throughout your work on this, because I was funded by NIH. I was never funded by Merck, despite what you might hear, but I was funded by the National Institutes of Health, so to study rotavirus. And as we created the strains, now we created those strains. I mean, those strains were created in our laboratory, and now they're going to be given to hundreds of millions of children. I mean, what's going to happen now? And so my coworker and I, Fred Clark, would go through all these gene databases. I mean, could the surface proteins of this virus mimic the proteins on the surface of synovial cells? In other words, could it cause arthritis? Could we cause inflammation against the joints? Does it mimic proteins on the surface of pancreatic islet cells? Could we be causing diabetes? I mean, we went through all of that because, the old Chinese proverb was, when the gods are angry, they grant your wish. I mean, our vaccine was about to be licensed and given to hundreds of millions of people. And it's an unnerving thing. When our vaccine was finally licensed and recommended, it wasn't like a moment of pure joy. Now you're going to really see what the issue is. I mean, you can rule out rare, relatively uncommon events pre-licensure, but you're not going to rule out rare events pre-licensure. You can't. I mean, Maurice Hilleman said it best. I never breathe a sigh of relief until the first 3 million doses are out there. You don't know. There was always an issue of safety for me. When I find myself now, because I'm on the NIH's active group, ACTIV. This is the group that's now setting up the clinical trial for the COVID-19 vaccine. That I preach safety is just something that's not in any sense new for me, nor is it new for anybody else. I think everybody in the world of vaccines wants these products to be safe. I mean, the worst thing, I think we are on the verge here of a really important moment in our history. This is a vaccine that is being made quickly. It is. I mean, the typical development timelines for a vaccine is about 20 years. This vaccine there probably will be not a vaccine. There'll probably be vaccines, COVID-19 vaccines that will be introduced in this country next year. I think that is likely. Will we know as much as we typically know for a vaccine? No, we won't. I mean, and the reason is because the virus is killing 1,000 to 2,000 people a day. And so the benefits, therefore, are much greater than they would be for a virus like rotavirus, which killed 60 children a year. So therefore, it's held to a different standard. It is. And I think we're going to learn things after its release that we didn't necessarily know before. And so we're trying to do everything we can to mitigate that risk. And I think most importantly, to make sure that we manage expectations when this vaccine gets released, so people can understand what we know and what we don't know and what we're looking for post-licensure. It's not even licensure. It's not going to be a licensed product. It's not a licensed product. This is going to be a so-called FDA-approved product, which is to say through the emergency use authorization. So So, I mean, you have a tremendous benefit. I mean, this virus has paralyzed us. Nobody's going to school, and not even in the fall, people are now talking about not going to school. This is a problem. And 35 million Americans have lost their jobs so far. That's 20% of the workforce. It's, we need a vaccine. And a vaccine is the only way to induce population immunity. We're not going to get it with natural infection. We're not. We don't get that with human coronavirus. There's no reason to believe it's going to happen here. So, safety and efficacy. I mean, but the most important thing is safety. I mean, worst comes to worst, it's not that effective. But the one thing you don't want to do is make sure you're not giving something to healthy people who that could hurt them, because most healthy young people are not going to die from this virus.
Right. And okay, so Lynette, did you connecting with Paul change your view on how he views safety in a serious way?
I will say that I didn't think that the safety, I didn't think they really cared until connecting with Paul. Like I was very, I just believed everything I had been told, which is sad because we're supposed to be, the free thinkers, but we still kind of listen to whoever's the top voices at the moment, And so I kind of just, thought they don't care. They don't listen. They don't look at the science. They're not doing the studies. Those kind of things. I will say, if I've ever had a question about something, I can ask him and he will explain it to me. I mean, and he's usually able to help me at least make sense of something. I mean, I'm a mom. I make simple products. I'm not a doctor. I'm not, any of those things. I'm not a scientist. I haven't ever developed this sort of stuff, So for me, my head does not process this information the same way someone like his would. So, I got to say, I have to look to people from all different sides of this and ask these same questions. And I'll ask the same questions I asked Paul to people who, I respect and revere from this, the same, side of what I'm doing. So, I think that I will say I didn't believe that the safety existed before, like that they cared at all. I mean, seriously, I really just was angry and thinking that it didn't exist. To me now, I do see some trying. I won't say that I completely agree with a lot of the stuff, because I know that when I'm in the CDC, I do hear presume and assume and a whole lot. And so we just assume this. We just figure, it's just like this, or we look at this from the past to assume this. So those kind of things bother me a little bit. I think there could be a lot better safety studies. And I do think that there's, giving a vaccine versus a vaccine, or versus something that still has, the antigen or whatever, I think we need to get more where there's placebo. So a true placebo, so we can actually see what's happening. But I mean, I know they say it's unethical, but I also think it's unethical to use the population as post-market data research too.
Oh, so COVID-19 trials are placebo-controlled trials. They will be placebo-controlled.
For COVID?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see that in real time, that's for sure. So I think listening to both sides allows us to hear the concerns that both of us have so we can address them. But I want to ask both of you, before we get into the topic of mandates, which I would like to discuss, I don't want to get into anything too scientific, but mandates should be, I have some interesting ideas I want to share with you guys, so what you guys think about it. But what do you guys both think about false balance? Lynette, do you think that talking to people who support vaccines, do you think that false balance is an issue for your perspective at all? And Paul, what do you think about publicly addressing concerns about vaccine safety? Do you think false balance is a concern yourself? How do you both see that issue? Because I know it's a nuanced thing.
Define false balance.
False balance is when you present two sides of an argument as if they're equal. And so a lot of news outlets they won't say pro-vaccine and anti-vaccine in the same sentence or whatever, because they don't want to give the presentation that both sides hold equal weight scientifically. So there's a concern at addressing the conversation there. And I think personally that if we don't address people's concerns, we're partly responsible for their positions. So it needs to be done in a careful way, and it needs to be done somehow, but maybe not excessively. But do you guys both see that as a problem, or do you think that the lack of that means that this kind of thing is important?
I'll let you go first, Paul. I'm sure your answer will be very interesting.
I think I think mandates are interesting, and here's what I would say about this. If you're John Salomon and you know that the oral polio vaccine is a rare cause of polio, and you also know when his son was getting the vaccine, that natural polio was not a problem in the United States. It was gone. It had been gone since the late 70s. 20 years we hadn't had polio. And you say, I refuse to get this vaccine. I think that its risks outweigh its benefits. That's a reasonable thing to say. It is, because I think you could argue the risks did outweigh the benefits. Now, if everybody made that decision, the polio could have come back into this country. I mean, polio still occurred in the world. International travel is common. That's possible. You can see the subtlety of that. On the other hand, if you're the parent of a child who's immune compromised for whatever reason, has cancer, is on biologicals, immune compromising biologicals, whatever, you depend on those around you to protect that. You depend on those around your child to protect them. And when measles starts to come raising its head, and it's always the first disease to come back because it's the most contagious, the question becomes, this is a common, if enough people make the decision not to get a measles vaccine, measles comes back. And for the children who depend on the herd, that's a threat to those children. And usually when you see measles come back, invariably it's the more vulnerable child who gets just to it in general. I mean, watch with this COVID-19, who's going to be the most hurt by this? The poor, the most vulnerable children. That's always true in these situations. Is it your responsibility as a member of society then to make sure that that 500,000 people who can't get vaccinated in this country are at some level protected? So it's hard. I mean, I get how that's hard, but those are the issues, and how do you resolve them?
Okay, well, so let's just let's skip the false balance thing. I think it's important to address the questions in a reasonable way. So what you said, Paul, before we get into mandates and the potential solutions, compromises on them, which I have a few in mind, I think everyone in this group, all three of us, are against the idea of forced vaccines. And what I mean specifically is like holding someone down, vaccinating them against their will. There's this big idea that that's a concern.
I think children are always getting vaccines against their will, but go ahead.
Well, that's true, but let's say adults, right? That home orders where your military is vaccinating you. I think that is probably never going to happen. I've never met a pro-vaxxer who supports that kind of idea, and it sounds pretty draconian. It seems like it's not a real threat. The real concern is vaccine mandates for schools. And how do you guys see that? Do you see forced vaccines as a salient issue, or do you think it's maybe over-exaggerated?
For me, it's a big deal. I mean, luckily right now for me, both my younger children have full medical exemptions in the state of Alabama. But if that was to change and there was something to be mandated, for my daughter Lily, after her injury, she became autoimmune neutropenic. From what I've learned from her hematologist, if Lily was to even receive a live virus vaccine, that could be very dangerous to her health, possibly even be fatal. So for me, for someone to mandate something on my child, it's going to become a battle. It's not going to happen. So I think that, for it to be something that they think they could push, you're going to come back against a lot of people like me. Where I noticed in your comments, somebody said that, I revere Paul and I trust him, and I see that, I can, trust him as a source for, he's his smarts or however you want to say it. So, my argument that that I'm anti-vax or whatever is basically doesn't count. Well, I watched my children injured, and it doesn't change that just because I'm able to be friends with Paul. So, I just want to throw that out there too. Just because I'm able to have a friendship with him doesn't mean my children weren't injured and that it doesn't change any of that. So I think people need to understand that too. Like the fact that we have a friendship or able to be the way we are with each other doesn't have anything to do with my children being injured or not injured.
Right. And you started the CDC thing, having everyone show up to, what was it? Go to the CDC?
To inundate the CDC ACIP meetings. That's right.
Yeah. I think you're a great candidate for this. So, but you're talking about mandated vaccines, right? And I want to differentiate between mandated vaccines and a forced vaccination for someone like an adult population where, we're getting forced to get a vaccine against our will. Paul, do you think that's ever going to happen? Do you think that's a concern?
In a better world, we wouldn't need mandates. I mean, obviously, if someone has a medical contraindication to getting vaccines, they shouldn't get vaccines, of course. And that's why every state has a medical exemption.
Right, but not mandates, forced vaccines, not mandates, right? A forced vaccine where like the military is forcing you to get vaccinated. Right, people are worried about that, but I don't think I've never heard someone support that publicly.
Yeah, so it's the difference between mandatory vaccination and compulsory vaccination. Mandatory vaccination is you were asked to get a vaccine. If you don't get a vaccine, then you may pay some sort of societal price. You may not be able to go to the school you want to go to. You may have to not be able to work in the hospital you want to work at, et cetera. So that's mandatory. Compulsory vaccination is you're vaccinated whether you want to be or not.
Right.
That exists in the military, but you don't have to join the military. So
right.
the option not to join the military. So that's different.
So that probably won't happen to the public, right? Compulsory vaccination.
No, I don't ever see that happening. We have enough trouble with mandatory vaccination. I don't think that's
right. Okay, good. I just wanted everyone to be on the same page with compulsory vaccination so that we can contribute to the discussion on mandatory vaccination and differentiate between the two. So we're all against compulsory vaccination. Now, mandatory vaccination, on the other hand, Paul, I know you don't like the side thing, but your side, more or less, wants to protect students from infectious diseases with vaccines at public school. We're just going to limit this to public school for now. And Lynette, you want the right to not vaccinate, especially for medical reasons, because your child is potentially immunocompromised. It could injure them more. So you want that right. So, okay. So I've been thinking about a compromise for this, and I have a few ideas in mind. So I want you guys both to weigh in on this. The first one is not requiring exemptions. And Paul, this question is more addressed to you. During our interview about coronavirus, we talked about the epidemiologically relevant area. So we were talking about what if you just shut down schools when coronavirus was near your town or city, once it was getting closer and actually a visible threat, not instead of reflexively closing or proactively closing, where you're just closing, it's not even nearby. It seems a little bit too early to be doing that kind of thing. So what do you think about allowing unvaccinated students into schools, but in the case of an outbreak or an ensuing outbreak or evidence of an outbreak nearby, then pulling them from the school? What do you think about that? And Lynette, I'd like to hear your input on that as well.
Are you talking about for COVID-19 or are you talking about for anything?
For anything, just in general. What are the problems with that? What are the benefits?
I don't think it would work. I mean, the measles is what we're talking about, because measles is a disease that is transmitted by microaerosol. So you don't have to have contact. You just have to be in the person's airspace. It's that contagious. So right. It has a reproducibility index of close to 20. I mean, this flu is 2, to put this in perspective. This virus, COVID-19, which is much more contagious than anybody thought, has a reproducibility index of 6, meaning you'll infect 6 people during your day. And the reason that this virus is much more contagious than people thought is because aerosolization is part of, I think, the problem with this COVID-19. But right. So I don't think it would work. I mean, I think, measles, I grew up, I'm a child of the 50s. I had measles, as did the 2 to 3 million other children that got measles in the 1950s. And, 48,000 people would be hospitalized and 500 would die. Measles can kill you. Don't fool around with measles. And I think when you have this sort of, let's just wait till there's an outbreak, assumes that those people for who that virus is infecting are going to survive. That's not always true. People die of measles, and don't fool around with measles. And I feel like we're doing that at some level.
Right.
See, the problem is that I completely agree with that. I mean, obviously, if there's a medical reason not to get a vaccine, don't get a vaccine. I agree with that. But if you don't have a medical reason not to get a vaccine, when you choose not to get it, you're not just making a choice for yourself or your child. You are also making a decision for somebody who they come in contact with. I mean, that's the difference. So how do you resolve that? I mean, it isn't just your choice. I've had a New York Times reporter actually called me recently and said, you're pro-choice. You're pro-choice regarding the choice whether to keep a child to term or not. And although I'm starting to waver on that, but in any case, you're pro-choice. So why aren't you pro-choice here? And the difference is you're not making a decision for when you choose not to get a vaccine, you're making a choice for those with whom you come in contact. That's not true in terms of choosing to terminate your own pregnancy. Although you could argue you're making a choice for somebody there too.
Right. So, okay, Paul doesn't think it would work, but Lynette, what do you think about that idea?
Well, I think it would enrage parents with children who are unvaccinated because their children seem to be some of the healthiest children, and they don't usually catch these things when they come through the school system. So that would be one thing. I think it may actually probably upset the parents having to pull their kids out. They would want the option, I'm sure. For me, honestly, I'll say this, Isaac, something I've noticed since COVID started and this lockdown started is my 6-year-old who's in kindergarten, the one that I told you about who was injured and became neutropenic, she's not been sick since. And she was literally so sick every week that she's been since she started kindergarten, comes home every time coughing, sick, runny nose, sick. Soon as this lockdown started, she has been 100% fine. So
good.
Just to tell you, I mean, that's just from me seeing from home, So for me, honestly, if they didn't want my daughter in school because she's not being vaccinated, which actually she's up to date, other than I think a booster. So technically she is vaccinated because her injury happened right after she received most of the bulk of childhood vaccines.
I see.
Right. So, but honestly, if they wanted her to be home, then I wouldn't have a problem with it personally, just because she's actually healthier at home. I think that, there's a lot of times we don't think about shedding and we don't think about those kind of things. And so there is a very big vaccine schedule right before school starts. And, these kids are getting a lot of that. And then they go to school within weeks of this. And some of these vaccines, from what I've learned by being at the CDC at these meetings, is they can shed up to 20 something days, some of them even longer than that. So it seems, it makes sense to me why when we send our kids back in the fall, they're sick all the time.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. I guess I see that a little differently. I think our daughter, when she went to daycare at first, she was sick day after day after day. We eventually pulled her out of daycare, just for the simple reason being that this is where you get your viral infections. I mean, look at the stay-at-home orders. Once we started stay-at-home, shelter-at-home, whatever, shelter-in-place lockdown, the incidence of influenza, although we were coming towards the end of the influenza season, dramatically dropped off. I mean, if you want to prevent the 40, 50,000 deaths from influenza next winter, stay home. And we will do a lot of that. What'll be interesting coming this next winter is that the incidence of measles vaccination has dramatically declined over the last few months. Not surprising, people are scared to take their children in for, child visits. So there's been a dramatic decline in the incidence of measles. So that we have a much greater percentage of our child population now that's susceptible to measles. What'll happen when we enter into the winter months coming up? I don't know. There'll be two competing forces. On the one hand, you'll have people, a greater percentage of children who are susceptible to measles. On the other hand, you have all this sort of, social distancing and sheltering in place that still may be going on, which would definitely decrease measles. So we'll see which of the two win out.
That's interesting. I've noticed that there's a Brady Bunch illusion when it comes to the measles, where people think it's completely harmless. And I saw a statistic where 1 in 3 in 1,000 kids.
Hey, Isaac, I don't want to interrupt you, but I just wanted to let you know, everybody is saying that nobody can see this but your own personal friends, because you have it set to friends only, so no one can see it. It's not being shared publicly anywhere. Just wanted to tell you that you have it set at friends only. So everyone trying to share it, sending me messages saying it's not showing up. It's showing that it's, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, let me try to change that real quick.
Just wanted to let you know, because I keep seeing somebody else said, I can't see it on your wall. It says attachment unavailable. It won't let us see it. But then I think you're
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now it is public.
Luckily they'll get to go back and now you can see comments. Luckily
now it's public. Okay.
Well, there's all these comments showing up all of a sudden.
That changed. Okay. Thank you, Lynette. That was a useful thing to mention. No, that was good. So I've noticed that measles, in terms of the risk of measles, 1 in 3, I think, in 1,000 people who get it will suffer encephalitis, which is brain swelling. And I think 25% of those people will end up passing away. So it seems like it's more serious than a lot of people make it out to be. What do you guys think about that?
About wild type virus? You're saying natural virus?
Yes.
Yeah, and it causes SSPE. So something called subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, which is fatal. So I've seen that a couple times in our hospital, where children had natural measles, then 5 to 7 years later gradually descend into darkness. Their handwriting deteriorates. They eventually go into comas and die. So I mean, measles
blindness too.
I think it's Vaccines at some level are a victim of their own success. So, in the 1950s, we weren't having this discussion largely because people knew what measles was. I mean, when people like Jenny McCarthy say, I'll take the measles every time, it tells you how successful the vaccine has been. That virus is
Right. So, okay. So let's go back to the vaccine mandate compromises. So we didn't really agree on that last one. But here's another one for you both. So in 2016, Michigan dropped the request for vaccine exemptions by 40%. And they still allowed personal exemptions and medical exemptions for religious reasons. I think they dropped philosophy, but they allowed religious exemptions. The way they did that was they added a vaccine education session required for people who requested exemptions. And so if you wanted an exemption, you just had to go through a course. And if you really want it, you'll go through the course and you'll still get the exemption. But apparently 40% of the people reduced the request for the exemption after the course. So I brought this up to my mom. She didn't like the idea too much because she said, well, it's kind of insulting. If I'm already going to pull my kid from school, I'm not going to sit. I'll sit through the course. It's not going to change my mind. But according to this, 40% of people did change their mind. So what do you think about, let's start with Lynette. What do you think about that? Do you agree with what my mom's kind of sentiment as that is? Or do you think maybe it's worth it if it allows you to get an exemption still? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I'm one who will read stuff from both sides anyway. So, I mean, that's just who I am. You see 3 of Paul's books back here. I'm one who will read stuff from both sides, and they're right next to all the other people that I know. So,
probably got Dissolving Illusions and some other books back there.
Yes, I do. I've got quite a few. But so for me, I would listen to anyway. I believe that how do you know anything if you don't listen to both sides of it? I I would listen, and if it helped me get an exemption from a child, great. If that's, if it's going to help you get an exemption, I don't see why you would not do it anyway.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. What do you think, Paul? Do you think that's a potential solution?
I think it's a good idea. It's not, I think no one should believe that they know everything. So if you have the option of learning more about a subject you're interested in this case, vaccines, it's always good. You can choose not to believe what you're hearing, but hopefully it's presented in a cogent, clear, science supportive manner. Sure.
I will say some of the people, I'll say most of the people that I know who don't choose to do this do nothing but read about vaccines. So
right. Are they reading balanced discussions though?
That's the problem. That's what I was going to say. I don't know if they're reading enough from both directions.
Right.
So that's the thing. For me, I've told it a million times. I said it to CNN London in that article all 3 of us were featured in. They could offer me $1 million and I'm broke as a joke, and I wouldn't take it to vaccinate myself or any of my family members ever again. Oh
yeah, that's good. Bribery is kind of not very convincing for people like you.
Right. Well, no, but what I'm saying is, I've seen it, and I think that if the system wasn't broken, you may not end up with as many people out here angry, screaming as well. Because that's one of the things I also think is the system being so broken. When you do see an injury, you can't, I wasn't compensated for either of my children. And Jazzy with her rotavirus reaction, Paul and I have spoke the reaction out. It's basically a textbook reaction, but they didn't want to compensate her. She was immediately denied. And, it puts parents on the defense. It puts you where it's like, okay, so this happened. This is how I'm supposed to be, taken care of to pay for these bills, to figure this out, to compensate the time lost from, your work or your whatever while your kids are in the hospital from all this. But instead it's like denied. And then so you're upset because now all of a sudden you're not only your child's hurt, but you can't afford to take care of the issue, and you become more and more angry at the system. So I think that, if the system wasn't so broken, we would not see as many people, angry and we wouldn't see as big of an anger. I don't know how to describe it, but if there's a solution to a problem, you see way less fight back than you do if the solution does not, solve the problem.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think that's why these kind of discussions need to happen, because then we can see each other's concerns and find answers. So with exemptions, that's a possible answer for before if we allow exemptions, right? Now let's think about this, okay? Let's say a school passes a mandate and let's just say there are no exemptions. You can't go to the school anymore. Let's think about post mandate solutions, ideas for this. So if a school passes a mandate, it's kind of a little unfair to the unvaccinated students' parents because they pay for public education through taxes, normally property tax, depending on the state that you live in. So you've been financially contributing to a public service that you are now barred from utilizing. So I think if we offered parents who are now exempt from school a payout, that's the wrong answer, because then you're offered a monetary incentive to, pull your kid out of public school. That's not the answer, but maybe a voucher for homeschooling or a private school would be an option. So what do you guys think about some kind of voucher for parents that are exempt? Because right now it's like, if you can't go to public school, good luck. Maybe it would reduce some of the...
I feel like you're kind of bringing segregation back there, my friend.
Well, I'm just saying if a school is going to pass an exemption, right? We did talk about some ideas on keeping the exemptions in place. But if a school is going to pass an exemption, wouldn't you at least want some kind of expanded option for alternatives if you're no longer able to use the school?
I think it's crazy we even have to talk about this sort of thing being in America. I think exemptions are even silly. I mean, if we are literally in the land of the free, you should have freedom of choice for what you're putting in your body. And like, to me, I really do believe that the only thing that we have in this country that is freedom is the illusion of freedom. I think there's so many things that we are controlled on, and especially this topic. And if you have, any kind of issue, you're automatically crazy and you're got 3 heads and, all these kind of things. So I think that it's hard for me, but I don't mind homeschooling my children, but I think it'd be really jacked up to force me to homeschool my children, especially because I actually did follow what I was told, and I did vaccinate my children. They had a reaction, and so they need the exemption. So if it becomes where they can't have that exemption or they just don't get to go to school, that seems really, really unfair to my children and their education. Like it you know what I'm saying? Like it really doesn't make sense.
I understand that. And what I'm trying to think about is if a school just passes a mandate and they're offering you some kind of trying to make it right kind of thing. I mean, where do we see any potential solutions there? So,
well, a lot of parents also can't stay home with their kids and homeschool them just because the school doesn't want them there because they're not vaccinated. I mean, we live in a time and an economy where both parents have to work. So if you're putting those kids out, well, what if the private schools don't want them for the same reason? What if the other systems don't want them for the same reason? What are we supposed to do? I mean, we have to educate our children.
Right. So that's what I was thinking. Maybe like a voucher for homeschooling online or something maybe would be an option to consider. Not saying that, that's a definite thing that's going to happen, but, it's worth thinking about how we could work with something like that happening. Now, to be fair, homeschooling mandates those seem very draconian to me. I mean, Lynette, you're already against public school mandates, but there's technically an alternative. Homeschooling might be hard for some people, but you could pull it off if vaccination is not an option for you. But if you mandate homeschool students, that's basically forced vaccines. I think California has that on the table. That just seems completely inappropriate. What do you guys think about mandates for homeschoolers? Lynette, I'm sure I'm with you there. I think that's completely wrong. But Paul, what do you think about mandates for homeschooled students?
Mandates were born in the 1970s when there started to be major outbreaks in cities like Los Angeles, Detroit, and others. Children were hospitalized and some died. And so for that reason, people thought this is a highly contagious disease. We need to mandate that. And with those mandates, we ultimately eliminated measles from the United States by the year 2000. The spread of exemptions has ultimately enabled people to choose not to vaccinate their children. And thus last year we had about 1,300 cases of measles, get to around 3,000 cases of measles, and we'll start to see children dying of measles again. Is that what we want? I mean, I just think this is we'll see the way this plays out as to what society is willing to tolerate in terms of cases and deaths from measles. I mean, when I was a child, you had no choice but to get measles or mumps or German measles or chickenpox. I had all those diseases. But we don't have to make that choice anymore. And I think, the question is what we're willing to tolerate, especially now with sort of the rise of biologicals. There's all these sort of, monoclonal antibodies directed against a variety of immune mediators in your body. That sort of does immune compromise people much more than they were before. So I guess we're going to see how this plays out and what we're willing to tolerate with this.
Okay. So the allowing unvaccinated students into schools and pulling them once a disease is coming or seen might not be the best solution, but the education program for waivers might be a good answer. The waivers option doesn't seem perfect because, like you said, Lynette, the private schools might not accept the waivers, and it doesn't really solve the problem with homeschooling. I mean, even if it pays for a good homeschooling program, what if the parents don't have the time to homeschool? So I don't have any ideas on this, but maybe you guys can help me brainstorm. What would a way, if homeschooled students, if the parents can't homeschool them, they have to work, but they can't go to public school or private school, what would an expanded homeschooling option that allows the students to still be sufficiently educated look like? Maybe tutoring? I don't know.
It still sounds like segregation to me, my friend. It sounds like it'd be like another school for the kids who choose not to do this. That's what it sounds like, and I disagree with that.
I understand.
Just being real. I mean, that's not okay. My daughter deserves the same education, and my daughter deserves to go to school with children of her age, no matter what their immunization status is. It's not my daughter's fault she was injured. It's not her fault that she can't receive anymore. Why should she have to suffer or be taken away from her peers?
Okay. I think I might have a decent compromise idea. So we don't have to agree on anything. The whole point is that we're all discussing this and thinking about it. But how about this? So I need to pitch this to a school board now. But okay, so what if with exemptions, right? Unvaccinated students that can be homeschooled are asked to be homeschooled with voucher programs available for them. If they can't be homeschooled, or the parent, let's say, really wants the public school, right? They view it like you do, Lynette. They're not okay, because a lot of parents like the idea of homeschooling. So if they support it, then that's an option. If they don't support it and they're against it, then maybe we could have the education program that reduces the rate of exemption request. And after reducing the amount of exemptions, if there is a disease nearby, then they are pulled if it's nearby in the epidemiologically relevant area. So this is kind of adding all of these solutions together might be a good solution. So what do you guys think about just throwing all those things in one kind of pool so each individual perspective is seen in the policy?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Paul. I've talked a lot in the last few minutes.
We're trying.
I'm getting a lot of flack in the comments. I'm going to let Paul talk for a minute. I don't think everybody's too happy with me right now.
Well, I think you're doing a great job. So
it's cool. I'm all right.
I'm just going to go at 4. Unfortunately, I thought this was going to be an hour because I do have something at 4. Is this? Are we?
Yeah, we're going to wrap. Yeah, answer this question, and I'll thank you guys for your time.
Yeah, so I'm probably not the guy to ask. I mean, I guess I'm old enough where I know what these diseases look like and felt like. I mean, I was in a polio ward when I was 5. So I guess we all have our biases and are influenced by our past. And I just think that if you can prevent something that harms children safely, that you should do that. I mean, is it absolutely safe? No. And when people sort of call me a pro-vaccine person, I actually don't see myself that way. I see myself as a pro-science person. I mean, when the smallpox vaccine was pushed in the early 2000s, right before we invaded Iraq, I was dead against that. I thought that the risks outweighed the benefits. So I think each vaccine has to be taken individually based on its risks and benefits, and that's going to be true for the vaccine that's coming now for SARS-CoV-2. Can't wait to see those data, and then can make a decision about whether we feel comfortable getting that vaccine, knowing what the benefits are. I mean, in many ways, this is like in the past where polio was a scourge. People I think had a right to know what those data were, but the vaccine looked safe, and certainly we eliminated polio from this country with that vaccine. So I think we can do the same thing with this vaccine coming up. But I do think this is a key moment. I mean, I think we as Lynette says, I mean, vaccine confidence in this country is fragile. And I think when this vaccine comes out, we better make sure we explain what we know and what we don't know before it rolls out, so that people are fully informed.
Great. Lynette, do you have anything to add?
Yes,
yeah,
I do.
Go ahead.
I just want to say real quick, I've seen a lot of, flack and a lot of stuff this week about me talking to Paul, which people should be used to by now, but whatever. Me talking with Isaac because of Isaac's history, which honestly, I'm going to tell you guys this right now. Whoever knows me, I'm not going to judge Isaac because somebody says something about him. I'm not going to judge Paul. You should already know that about me by now. And I wish other people would see this way. So more of these conversations could happen. This is not about him versus me, him versus this, pro versus anti, this versus this. This is about humanity. This is about working together for humanity. This is about, how can you say they don't listen to us, and be so angry when you won't speak to them? And don't be angry for those of us who are willing, because honestly, like I said earlier, I have respect for him for even being willing to speak to me. And I hope that he feels the same way. I mean, this isn't easy, and we both take a lot of flack. I've been death threatened from people on the pro and the anti side for being friends with Paul. That's sad to me. It shouldn't be that way. I shouldn't have my life threatened because I can see past hate far enough to understand that he's just a man, and that we can agree on, hell, we can agree on many other things. Just reading some of Paul's literature and seeing like the quotes he does or the things like that. We actually have very similar taste in many other things in life. We don't have to hate each other. Me and Isaac don't have to hate each other because Isaac is more for choice and against mandates, or however, he wants to see things. It doesn't have to be this way. Paul, I respect you. I love you. And you know that. Whoever doesn't like it, I apologize because I love them too. It's okay. Isaac, I love you. You're a new friend of mine. I respect you. And I hope that this leads to more stuff like this. And hopefully, like I told Paul, I know I am not a competent adversary for an actual debate on vaccines. I'm just a mother. I don't have those credentials. But I hope that one day someone will be able to be respectful enough to sit just like this, and they can have those conversations, because I think it would actually be very fruitful. So for both sides, I know Paul said he wants to understand, both sides just as bad as I do. So I don't see that would be an issue if people can be respectful, and I'm going to put this out there too. I told you I was going to say this. I'm going to say it now. So many people, every time Paul and I speak or something happens with Paul, they say, why won't he just speak to Dell? Why won't he just speak to Dell? If someone has made fun of you or has bashed you or has meaned you up like crazy, knocking you out and KO and all these kind of things, I wouldn't want to have that conversation where I would be feeling like I could be being attacked or whatever. So people need to understand that too. I've never approached Paul in that manner. I was angry in the past. We've had our moment in the past. I learned how to get past that, because when you are angry, you're giving other people a piece of you, and they don't even know they have it. Why do that? Why live in misery and anger so that somebody else who doesn't even know you're angry, they're not affected? You know what I'm saying? It's forgiveness. It's mercy. It's love. Lead with love, people, Sorry, I just want to put that out there.
Oh, no, that was awesome. That was great.
It's so frustrating, and I just think people need to really understand.
Well, this is how we're actually going to get somewhere.
Hopefully I think we're not, the June meeting is online, but hopefully we'll be back in October. I'll see you then.
Yes, you will.
Awesome.
Yeah, the June meeting is virtual. I've kind of been blowing them up. They're kind of mad at me right now.
Well, guys, thank you so much for participating. I think we really showed people how it's done, so we can have these conversations the right way and think about things that actually work for everyone and see each other as people and work from there. So thank you so much, Paul, for being here. Thank you so much, Lynette, for being here.
No problem.
I hope we have another discussion like this in the future.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I'm always down. All right. Have a good
All right.
Bye,
guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Okay, guys. So that was the conversation. Well, that was definitely very interesting. I think it was worth it having that discussion. I am seeking participants for upcoming videos in this same format. So If you think you can maintain a respectful attitude with someone you fundamentally disagree with, like they just did, get a hold of me. Reach out, message me on Facebook, email me at isaac2055@gmail.com. We'll get something working out, or if you have any suggestions for someone else. And discussions for this video will be taking place in the group Vaccine Talk. It's a forum for pro and anti-vaxxers. You can type in vaccinetalk.org and you will go right to the page. Just fill out a small thing. They'll add you. Doesn't matter if you support vaccines or you're completely against them. Search hashtag bridging the gap. Let's see if I can get that in there. Bridging the gap. There it is. Search that in Vaccine Talk. You'll find the discussion on this video. We'll talk about mandates, potential solutions. Any ideas you have on compromises for mandates, put them there. We'll discuss that in Vaccine Talk. It's a really great group. And thank you all for joining. And I hope to see you for the next episode of Bridging the Gap. Thank you, guys.